I'm begging you, please don't tell them. I can explain everything, just give me another chance.
You know, there is a specific kind of silence that happens when a titan falls. It's not the quiet of a library or the hush of a church. It's a vacuum, a sudden, violent absence of noise where the air gets sucked out of the room and everyone is just left standing there, staring at the impossible. And that is exactly what happened at 8:43 p.m. inside the penthouse ballroom of the Vertex Tower in Seattle. Julianne Voss, the woman who had just been on the cover of Forbes, the woman who was about to revolutionize the way human brains interact with technology, was on her knees, clawing at her throat, her $3,000 silk dress pooling around her like spilled ink. The room was packed with billionaires, tech moguls, and the kind of people who buy islands for their birthdays. And not a single one of them moved, they just watched, frozen in that mix of horror and morbid curiosity that rich people get when reality crashes their party. But Julianne wasn't looking at them. She wasn't looking at her board of directors or the press or even her husband, standing in the front row with his mouth hanging open. No, she was looking past them, way back into the shadows near the service entrance, her eyes locking onto a man holding a mop bucket. She reached out a hand that was trembling so bad her diamond bracelet sounded like a rattle, and she whispered two words that cut through that dead silence like a knife. Elias ... help. And suddenly, every head in that room whipped around to see who the hell Elias was, expecting maybe a bodyguard or a secret doctor. But all they saw was an old man in a gray jumpsuit, shoulders hunched, holding a rag that smelled like industrial lemon cleaner. A man who had spent the last 5 years being treated like a piece of furniture, and nobody, absolutely nobody, understood why the queen of biotech was begging the janitor to save her life. But to understand why that moment hit like a freight train, you have to rewind, you have to go back to the start of the shift. Back before the champagne popped and the lights went down. It was raining that day, that relentless gray Seattle drizzle that soaks right into your bones. And Elias Thorne was pushing his cart out of the service elevator on the 60th floor, just like he did every single night. Elias was 62, with hair the color of steel wool and hands that looked like they were carved out of oak. Rough, calloused, scarred from harsh chemicals and years of gripping mop handles. But if you looked close, really close, you'd see his fingers were long, elegant. The kind of fingers that could play a piano or Once Upon a Time, stitch a blood vessel thinner than a human hair. He parked his cart near the glass wall, looking out at the city lights blurring in the rain, and for a second, just a second, he caught his reflection and straightened his back, seeing the ghost of the man he used to be, Dr. Elias Thorne, the chief of neurosurgery at Mercy General, the man who wrote the textbooks these young hotshot doctors were studying right now. But then the elevator dinged, and the illusion shattered. He slumped back into Elias the janitor, the invisible man. His supervisor, a guy named Rick, who was half his age and had an ego the size of the building, came storming down the hall, snapping his fingers. "Thorne, hey, space cadet, wake up," Rick barked, pointing at a smudge on the marble floor that was microscopic at best. "We got the launch of the neural link tonight, okay? The vice president is gonna be here. I want this floor so shiny I can see my own nose hairs in it. And listen, when the guests start arriving, you disappear. Got it? You stay in the shadows. Nobody wants to see the help when they're drinking $1,000 wine." Elias just nodded. "Understood, Rick," his voice calm, deep. A voice that used to command operating theaters, now used to apologize for existing. Rick rolled his eyes and walked off, muttering about lazy old-timers, and Elias just gripped his mop handle a little tighter. The knuckles turning white dot. It had been 5 years since Julianne Voss stole his life. 5 years since he was the lead researcher on the Neural Link project, a technology designed to cure paralysis, to give people their lives back. He had brought Julianne in as a business partner, A brilliant young MBA to handle the funding, but he didn't realize she was a shark in a pantsuit. She wanted to rush the trials. She wanted to monetize the tech before it was safe, and when Elias refused, when he threatened to blow the whistle on the side effects he was seeing in the data, she destroyed him. It was efficient, brutal, and complete faked embezzlement charges, a manufactured malpractice suit that ruined his reputation, and a media smear campaign that painted him as senile and dangerous. She took his patents, his research, his name, and left him with nothing but a mountain of legal debt and a criminal record that meant no hospital would ever hire him again. So here he was, cleaning the floors of the building where she was about to take credit for his life's work. As the afternoon wore on, the floor transformed, caterers rushing around setting up ice sculptures and light displays. And Elias worked quietly in the periphery, polishing brass, emptying bins, making himself small. He saw the banner hanging over the stage, the Vros link, the future of human evolution, and the bile rose in his throat, bitter and hot. He went into the executive washroom to restock the towels, and that's when he heard them. Two junior executives washing their hands, talking loud. Not even acknowledging Elias was there on his knees scrubbing a grout line. "Julianne is nervous," one of them said, laughing. "She's been popping those beta blockers like candy all day." "Can you blame her?" The other guy replied, checking his hair in the mirror. "She's presenting the live demo on herself tonight. Putting the prototype chip in her own head to prove it's safe. That's bold." "It's insane is what it is," the first guy said. "But hey, if the stock doubles, I don't care if she grows a second head." Elias froze, his hand hovering over the scrub brush. She was doing a live demo? With the prototype? He felt a cold chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The prototype had a flaw, a specific feedback loop issue in the temporal lobe interface that triggered under high stress or rapid sensory input. He had written a whole report on it. The very report she had buried when she fired him. If she had that chip in her brain and walked out onto a stage with flashing lights and booming sound systems, the sensory overload could trigger a cascade failure. It wouldn't just be a glitch, it would be a massive, localized seizure that could fry her cognitive centers. He stood up slowly, looking at himself in the mirror, wrestling with the urge to just walk out, to go home and let nature take its course, let her arrogance be her downfall. Why should he care? She took everything from him. She made him a pariah. But then he looked at his hands, those surgeon's hands, and he heard the echo of the oath he took 40 years ago. First, do no harm. It didn't say, do no harm unless the person is a jerk. It was absolute. The gala started at 7 p.m., and the room filled up with the smell of expensive perfume and ambition. Elias was tucked away in the back corner behind a massive potted fern, technically invisible, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the crowd. And finally he saw her. Julianne entered the room like she owned the oxygen everyone was breathing, wearing a shimmering silver gown, smiling that predatory smile, shaking hands, laughing. But Elias saw what the cameras missed. He saw the way her left hand was trembling slightly, a rhythmic tremor that she tried to hide by clutching her clutch purse. He saw the slight droop in her left eyelid, a sign of cranial nerve pressure. She was already in the early stages of rejection. The chip was heating up, interfering with her motor cortex. Around 8 p.m., a waiter dropped a tray of champagne flutes near the VIP section, the glass shattering with a loud crash. Julianne flinched, not a normal startle reaction, but a violent full-body jerk, her eyes rolling back for a split second before she recovered. Elias stepped forward instinctively, grabbing a broom and dustpan to clean up the mess, moving closer to her. He was on his knees sweeping up the glass when Julianne looked down, her eyes glazing over him like he was part of the architecture, until she paused, blinking rapidly. "You missed a spot," she slurred slightly, the words mushy in her mouth. Elias looked up, locking eyes with her for the first time in 5 years. "Ms. Vross," he said, his voice low, "you have a microtremor in your left extensor digitorum, and your pupillary response is sluggish. The chip is overheating. You need to cancel the demo." Julienne's face went hard, recognition flickering in her eyes, followed by a wave of pure contempt. "Elias?" She hissed, looking around to make sure no one heard. "What are you doing here? I thought you were in prison or dead." "I work here, Julienne," he said, sweeping the glass into the pan. "And I'm telling you, as the man who designed that architecture, the sensory dampers aren't calibrated for this environment. If you go on that stage with the strobes and the feedback, you will seize. You could stroke out." She laughed, a brittle, jagged sound. "You're pathetic," she spat. "You're just jealous. You want me to fail so you can say I told you so. Security." She waved a hand at a nearby guard. "Get this janitor away from me. He's bothering the guests." The guard, a beefy guy named Tony who Elias actually liked, looked apologetic. "Come on, Elias, let's go. Don't make a scene." Elias stood up, gripping the broom handle, looking Julienne dead in the eye. "It's not jealousy, Julienne. It's physiology. You're ticking." She sneered, turning her back on him. "Get him out of my sight." Tony guided Elias back to the service corner. "Stay here, man," Tony whispered. "Don't make me kick you out. I need this job." Elias nodded, leaning against the wall, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had tried. He had done his duty. Now he just had to watch the train wreck. The lights dimmed. The bass of the intro music thumped in everyone's chest, and Julienne walked out onto the stage to thunderous applause. A massive screen behind her showed a live feed of her brain activity, glowing blue and green lines dancing in complex patterns. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice amplified, booming through the speakers. "Tonight, we don't just step into the future, we become it." The crowd cheered. But Elias watched the screen. He saw the spikes in the beta waves, the jagged red lines starting to bleed into the blue. She was talking about integration, about speed, about memory, but her speech was getting faster, more manic. "The neural link isn't just a chip," she said. "Pacing the stage, it's a—" She stopped. She looked confused. She touched her temple. The screen behind her flickered, the brain waves spiking erratically. "It's a symphony," she managed to get out, but her hand flew to her mouth. The strobe lights for the presentation kicked in, flashing rapid white pulses, and that was the trigger. On the big screen, the brain activity went from a symphony to a chaotic storm of red static. Julienne screamed, a guttural, terrifying sound, and collapsed to her knees, clutching her head. The microphone fell with a feedback screech that made everyone cover their ears. Chaos erupted. People were shouting, "Is this part of the show? Call 911. She's having a stroke." Her chief medical officer, a guy named Dr. Aris, who was more of a politician than a doctor, rushed the stage. "Give her room." Aris shouted. "She's just fainting. Get back." He grabbed her shoulders and tried to lay her flat, but Julienne's body went rigid, her back arching in a tonic seizure. Aris panicked. "Get the defibrillator." He yelled, "No." Elias shouted from the back of the room, his voice booming with a command that made people jump. "Do not use a defibrillator. It's neural, not cardiac. You'll fry her brain stem." He started running, pushing past startled investors in tuxedos, shoving aside a waiter. "Tony, let me through." He yelled at the guard. Tony hesitated, looking at the dying woman and the desperate janitor, and stepped aside. Elias sprinted to the stage, vaulting up the stairs just as Dr. Aris was ripping open the AED pads. "Get away from her, you crazy janitor." Aris screamed, trying to push Elias back. "Security." Elias didn't even blink. He grabbed Reese by the lapels of his expensive suit and shoved him backward with strength he didn't know he had. "She's in a feedback loop, you idiot. Look at the monitor." He pointed at the giant screen, which was now a solid block of red interference. "Her motor cortex is locked. If you shock her heart, the surge will travel up the vagus nerve and liquefy her temporal lobe. Do you want to kill her?" Reese stammered, looking at the screen, then at Elias. Who are you?" Elias ignored him. He dropped to his knees beside Julianne. She was convulsing, foaming slightly at the mouth, her eyes rolled back so far only the whites were visible. But then, for a split second, the seizure broke, a moment of lucidity in the storm. She looked up, her vision blurring, her brain on fire, and she saw him. She saw the man she had destroyed, the only man who knew how this machine worked because he was the one who dreamt it. She reached out, her hand shaking, grabbing the fabric of his dirty gray jumpsuit. Elias ... She gasped, tears mixing with the sweat on her face. "Help!" The room went dead silent. The investors, the press, the board members, they all stared. Why was the CEO asking the janitor for help? Elias looked down at her. He could walk away. He could let Reese use the AED and claim ignorance. It would be perfect poetic justice. But then he looked at her hands, human hands, terrified hands. He took a deep breath, and the janitor vanished. Dr. Elias Thorne returned. "I need a magnet," Elias barked, his voice sharp and precise. "A high Gauss magnet right now. Who has a speaker system?" "The subwoofers." He pointed at the massive sound system at the edge of the stage. "Tear it open." "I need the magnet from the driver." The sound technicians just stared at him. "Do it." Elias roared, and Tony the guard jumped into action, pulling a knife and slashing the mesh of the speaker, ripping up a heavy magnet from the back. He tossed it to Elias. "Hold her head," Elias ordered Reese. "And for God's sake, keep her airway open." Reese, terrified and out of his depth, obeyed. Elias took the heavy magnet. He knew the fail-safe protocol. If the chip locked up, a localized magnetic field applied at a specific angle 45 degrees from the temple, rotating counterclockwise, would trigger a hard reset. It was a manual override he had designed for emergencies, a backdoor Julianne didn't even know existed. He placed the magnet against her temple. "This is going to hurt," he whispered. He began to rotate it. Julianne screamed again, her body thrashing so hard it took Tony and Reese to hold her down. The screen behind them flashed white, then black. Sparks actually flew from the interface port behind her ear. "Come on," Elias gritted his teeth, sweat dripping from his forehead onto the marble floor. "Reset, reset, damn you." He twisted the magnet one final time. Julianne gasped, a huge, sucking breath of air, and her body went limp. The seizure stopped instantly. The screen behind them rebooted, showing the slow, steady blue rhythm. A sinus rhythm. She was unconscious, but she was stable. Elias checked her pulse, checked her pupils. They were reacting. He sat back on his heels, dropping the magnet, his chest heaving, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. The silence in the room was heavy, thick. Then, slowly, a slow clap started. It was Dr. Reese, then Tony, then the whole room erupted. But Elias didn't hear the applause. He was looking at Julianne's face, peaceful now, and he realized he had just saved the monster. He stood up, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit, feeling suddenly very tired and very old. He turned to leave, to fade back into the shadows, but he found his path blocked. Not by security, but by the cameras. Flashbulbs went off in his face. A reporter shoved the microphone at him. Sir, who are you? How did you know what to do?" Elias looked at the camera, then down at his name tag that just read Elias, Custodial. He ripped the tag off and dropped it on the stage next to the unconscious CEO. "I'm the guy who invented the machine," he said quietly, but the microphone picked it up perfectly. "And tell Ms. Vross that if she wants to keep it, she needs to read the safety manual I wrote 5 years ago." Chapter 4. He walked off the stage, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea, not because he was rich, not because he was famous, but because for the first time in 5 years, they actually saw him. He walked straight to the service elevator, pressed the button, and waited. The doors opened, he stepped in, and as they closed, he saw Dr. Aris looking at him with a mixture of shame and awe. The doors shut, leaving the applause behind, and Elias Thorne leaned his head against the cool metal wall and closed his eyes. The night wasn't over yet. The ambulance was coming, the police were coming, and Julianne would wake up. And when she did, everything was going to change. The ride down in the service elevator was the longest 30 seconds of Elias's life. The adrenaline was draining out of him, leaving behind a shaky, hollow feeling in his gut. He looked at his hands, still dirty, still smelling of lemon cleaner, but now they felt different. They felt useful again. When the doors opened on the ground floor, he expected to just walk out into the rainy Seattle night and disappear. Maybe catch a bus back to his small apartment in the combat zone. Drink a cheap beer and pretend none of this happened. But as he stepped into the lobby, he realized the world wasn't done with him. The lobby was swarming. Paramedics were rushing in with a gurney. Police were blocking the main entrance. And a wall of reporters who had been waiting outside for the gala to end were now pressing against the glass like zombies. Elias tried to slip out the side exit near the loading dock, but a voice stopped him. "Dr. Thorne, wait." It was Tony, the security guard, jogging out of the elevator bank, out of breath. "Man, you can't just leave. The cops want to talk to everyone, especially the guy who ... You know, performed unlicensed surgery on stage." Elias sighed, turning around. "It wasn't surgery, Tony. It was a hard reset. Physics, not medicine." Tony shook his head, a grin splitting his face. "I don't know what it was, Doc, but that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. You took charge. You owned that room. I mean, ... then, who are you, really?" Elias looked at the young man, really looked at him. "I'm just a guy who did his job, Tony." Before Tony could reply, the paramedics came rushing back out of the elevator, pushing the gurney. Julianne was strapped down, an oxygen mask on her face, conscious now but groggy. As they wheeled her past, she turned her head, her eyes scanning the lobby frantically until they landed on Elias. She reached up, pulling the mask down. "Stop," she croaked. The paramedics hesitated. "Ma'am, we need to get you to Mercy General," one of them said. "I said stop," she rasped, summoning that CEO command voice, even from a stretcher. The gurney halted a few feet from Elias. The lobby went quiet. The reporters outside were flashing photos through the glass. Julianne looked at Elias, her eyes searching his face, stripping away the jumpsuit, the gray hair, the years of grime. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you do it? You could have let me burn. I destroyed you." Elias put his hands in his pockets. "You did," he said simply. "You took my career, my reputation, my money. But you couldn't take the oath. And you couldn't take the fact that I'm a doctor. Doctors don't kill people, Julianne. Not even the ones who deserve it." She stared at him, tears welling up in her eyes, spilling over onto the pillow. I can't feel my legs," she whispered, the terror breaking through her voice. "The feedback loop. Did it sever the connection?" Elias stepped closer, his voice dropping into that professional soothing register he hadn't used in years. "It's temporary paralysis. The surge exhausted your motor neurons. It will pass in about 6 hours if you don't stress the system. But that chip has to come out, tonight, and I'm the only one who knows how to remove it without taking half your temporal lobe with it." She grabbed the paramedic's arm. "He comes with me. He does the surgery. The paramedic looked at Elias's jumpsuit. Ma'am, this is a janitor. We have top surgeons at Mercy. Those surgeons read his textbooks. Julienne screamed, her voice cracking. If he doesn't scrub in, I don't go. I'll sign a waiver. I'll buy the hospital. I don't care. Get him in the ambulance. The ride to Mercy General was surreal. Elias sat in the back of the rig, the siren wailing, watching the monitors while the EMTs looked at him like he was an alien. He wasn't thinking about the surgery yet. He was thinking about the irony. Mercy General was the hospital that had fired him, the hospital that had escorted him out by security 5 years ago. Now he was walking back in through the ambulance bay, flanking the most famous patient in the city. When they burst into the A, chaos ensued. The chief of surgery, Dr. Marcus Valen, a man Elias had actually trained as a resident, was there to meet the VIP patient. Valen took one look at Elias and stopped dead in his tracks. Elias? Valen whispered, his face draining of color. What are you? What is happening? Elias didn't blink. Patient is post-ictal following a neural feedback cascade. Implant is unstable. It needs immediate explantation. Prepare OR1. I need a stereotactic frame and the microdissectors I designed in 2018. Do you still have them? Valen looked at the hospital administrator standing nearby, a suit who was already shaking his head. Absolutely not, the administrator barked. Thorne has no license. He's a felon. If he touches her, our insurance is void. Get him out of here. Julienne, despite being strapped down, managed to grab Valen's scrub top. Marcus, she hissed. If you send him away, I will sue this hospital into the ground. I will defund every grant you have. He operates. Or I walk. The standoff lasted 30 seconds, but it felt like an hour. Finally, Valen turned to the administrator. I'll take responsibility. He doesn't touch the knife. I do. He guides me. He's a consultant. A very, very expensive consultant. The administrator looked at the cameras gathering outside the EO doors and swallowed hard. Fine, but if she dies, it's on you. They scrub it in. It was a bizarre ritual for Elias, stripping off the janitor jumpsuit and putting on the blue scrubs. He washed his hands, those rough, callous janitor hands, scrubbing them until the skin was raw, watching the gray water swirl down the drain, taking 5 years of dirt with it. When he walked into the OR, the smell hit him: antiseptic, ozone, cold air. It smelled like home. The surgery took 7 hours. It was a nightmare of complexity. The chip had fused with the duramater, the protective covering of the brain. One slip and Julienne would lose her ability to speak or understand language or recognize faces. Valen was a good surgeon, but he was sweating, his hands hesitant. Elias stood on a step stool behind him, looking at the microscope monitors, his voice a steady drone in Valen's ear. Move left, 2 millimeters. Stop. That's the middle cerebral artery. Don't nick it. Use the bipolar cautery. Lower. Now peel it back. Gently, like you're peeling a grape. At one point, an alarm blared: a bleed. Valen froze. I can't see the source. He panicked. Blood field is obscuring the view. Elias didn't hesitate. He stepped in, not taking the knife, but reaching over to adjust the suction and retract the tissue with his gloved hands. There, he pointed. Small vessel behind the implant. Clip it. Valen clipped it. The bleeding stopped. They worked in tandem, a dance they hadn't practiced in years but remembered perfectly. When the last suture was thrown, and the chip was sitting in a metal dish, a twisted piece of silicon and gold, the room exhaled. Valen stepped back, ripping off his mask. We did it, he breathed. He turned to Elias. You haven't lost a step, old man. Elias just leaned against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. He was exhausted. "I didn't do anything," Elias murmured. "I just told you where to look." The recovery was slow, but steady. 2 days later, Elias was back at the Vertex Tower, not as a janitor, but to clean out his locker. He had resigned that morning. He couldn't go back to scrubbing floors, not after tasting the OR again. He didn't know what he was going to do. Maybe teach, maybe just retire for real this time. He was packing his few belongings, a spare uniform, a photo of his late wife, when his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. "Thorne," he answered. "Elias?" It was Julienne. Her voice was weak, but clear. I'm watching the news." Elias paused. "Yeah? What are they saying?" "They're saying Dr. Elias Thorne is a hero," she said. "They're saying the medical board is holding an emergency session to review your case. The evidence of the frame-up. It's all coming out, Elias. I gave it to them." Elias gripped the phone. "You what?" "I told them everything," Julienne said, and he could hear the tears in her voice. "I gave the DA the emails, the falsified reports, the payoffs. I told them how I set you up. I'm going to prison, Elias, for fraud, for embezzlement, for all of it." Elias sat down on the bench in the locker room. "Why?" he asked. "You could have just thanked me and moved on." "Because you saved me," she said. "Not just my life. You saved me from being the person who let you rot. I looked at you on that stage, in that jumpsuit, and I realized I had billions of dollars, but I was the poorest person in the room. You had nothing, and you were the richest. I wanted to be like you. Just for once." Elias didn't know what to say. He hung up the phone and walked out of the building. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds over Seattle, hitting the wet pavement and making it shine like diamonds. He walked to the bus stop, but this time, people looked at him. A woman sitting on the bench stood up. Are you the doctor from the news?" she asked. Elias smiled, a genuine tired smile. "Yeah," he said. "I'm the doctor." 6 months later, Elias Thorne wasn't scrubbing floors. He was standing at a podium at the University of Washington, looking out at a sea of first-year medical students. He was wearing a white coat, his name embroidered on the pocket. Dr. E. Thorne, Professor of Ethics and Neurosurgery. "Medicine isn't about the technology," he told the quiet room. "It isn't about the money, or the fame, or the God complex. It's about what you do when the lights go out. It's about who you are when nobody is watching. It's about the person holding the mop and realizing that their hands are just as holy as the ones holding the scalpel." He paused, looking down at his own hands. You can strip a man of his title. You can strip him of his wealth. But you cannot strip him of his nature. If you are a healer, you heal. That is the burden, and that is the privilege. He looked up, his eyes shining. "Now, open your books to chapter 4. Let's talk about feedback loops." And somewhere, in a minimum security federal facility, Julienne Vross watched him on the TV in the common room. She smiled, a sad, genuine smile, and went back to sweeping the floor of the cafeteria. She was learning to clean. And for the first time in her life, she was starting to feel clean, so. Here's the question I want to leave you with, because this story keeps me up at night. If you were Elias, if someone took your life, your name, your dignity, and destroyed it for profit, and then you saw them dying at your feet, what would you have done? Would you have let the magnet stay in the speaker? Would you have let karma take its course? Or would you have remembered who you are? Let me know in the comments. Would you save the monster? Or would you let them burn? Because the line between a janitor and a savior isn't the uniform. It's the choice. Thanks for listening.